by calling this meeting of the Scott County Park Advisory Commission. We will start off with roll call. Kristen French.
Here.
Kathy Gerlach.
Here.
Jerry Hennon.
Here.
Eric Spieler.
Here.
Pat Stieg.
Here.
Mark Ewert.
Here.
And myself, Barb Hedstrom, are present. Let's proceed to our agenda item number 2, which will be the Pledge of Allegiance. If you don't have a flag, please feel free to join me with my little flag here. So I pledge allegiance to the flag, in the United States
of America, and to the republic
for which it
which
stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. We are going to go on to approval of the agenda item. There is one slight adjustment in the workshop. We're going to organize the first 2 items. So item A will be roadway directional sign, and item B will be the mitigation project. Can I have is there any comments about the agenda? Otherwise, I'll certainly entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda, Ewert.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We'll go on to item number 4, recognition of any citizens. I'm not aware of any. And let's then proceed. We don't have any agenda items for operations or outreach. Is that correct, Patty?
That's correct.
Then let's go ahead to agenda item number 7, administrative planning and development in the 2022 to 26 Parks Improvement Program overview.
All right, thank you. That is me. So for this item, I'm going to provide a quick overview of the Parks Improvement Program. I won't stray too far at all from the memo. I'm hoping folks had a chance to read the materials. I'm going to share a little bit about the projects being proposed, some of which will be familiar. And during the meeting section, or during this memo item section, I think would be a good time to answer questions and take some feedback. And if the PAC has any ideas for projects to offer them, but we will loop back to this in the workshop where we can spend a little more time with feedback and questions and ideas, and possibly rank the project. There's not a lot of them, so the ranking for the ones that are listed will go pretty quickly. So hopefully this information is starting to sound familiar to folks. We talk about the capital plan, if not every year, every other year. It's one chapter, or I should say the Parks Improvement Program is one chapter of the county's overall capital investment plan or program. And it's really intended to support the really thoughtful and sort of methodical investment in the county's existing infrastructure, and then investment in other areas that align with county priorities. And the process requires sort of our supporting processes and documentation or justification. So for instance, when we propose projects, they're vetted, and we're expected to have maybe an inventory or some sort of evaluation that justifies the need. And the easiest example of that in our parks system is our pavement maintenance. So the county capital plan almost every year invests in maintaining our trail pavement, our park road and parking lot pavement. And we justify the need because via an evaluation that's done every 2 years that reports on the condition of the pavement. So that's an example of how we justify the need for that funding. Another way that we're expected to support our projects is to show that they're in a plan. So a park master plan, or the 2040 plan that we worked on and finalized in 2018. So the Park Commission might remember one of our strategies that we really wanted to focus on was building awareness. And you might remember some of our conversations around how do we do that? And we talked a lot about communication and using more digital communication and being more progressive, but not abandoning some of our, what we might call our older traditional forms. And so for instance, you'll see our, the famous brown sign, the directional signs project. And to me, that's an example where we've really shown that it makes sense to spend money or invest in those signs, and that's supported by input from the Parks Commission, from the county board, and the public in different venues, especially our 2040 plan. The types of projects that we typically see in our PIP are land acquisition, development project would be, let's put new trails in at Doyle Kennefic. Redevelopment, although we haven't really seen much of that, I would say that the current capital plan, and there is a copy in your packets, you may have noticed or remember from past years, we're redoing a pretty substantial boardwalk at Murphy Hanrahan on one of the hiking trails. And that might be an example of redevelopment. But other than that, well, I suppose, you know what, we had at Cleary when we did the road and trail projects, and then we worked on that building, that probably, when we submitted that probably was a redevelopment project. And then infrastructure maintenance would be our paved examples are our paved trails. And then I always like to note, and I think I'm, it's sometimes in some circles would be considered unique. I, in the past, have submitted major natural resource restoration projects through the CIP, and that's typically supported. There's at times pushback that, oh, that needs to be operating, or that's not a capital project. And I've pretty successfully, I think, demonstrated that you know, the natural landscapes are foundational to our parks, right? And when we do a major restoration projects, it's complex. There should be discussion. It should be vetted. It typically involves the community and partners and various funding streams. So the way that I've approached it is when we're going to do a major natural resource restoration project, we try to run it through the capital plan. It's also really nice to, when we use our legacy allocation on development projects, we've, I think almost, let me think about this. In many cases, I don't know if it's most, I'd have to look at the projects, but in many cases, we have a companion natural resource restoration project. And that's for various reasons. One, I think it helps us sort of stay true to using legacy on many things. It's a really great way to get momentum for a natural resource project. It's a great way to get matching dollars. So just kind of reminding folks that my approach is to sometimes or to often tie a natural resource project with a development project. When we submit capital or CIP projects or PIP projects, we are asked to define them as either a preservation project, an enhancement project, or a new capability. Preservation would be like our trail projects. A new capability would be like our land acquisition projects, or our Doyle project would be a new capability. When we introduced trails at Spring Lake, that would have been a new capability. Every year prior to the process starting, we wait to hear from county administration about sort of what the new what the timeline is going to be, and guidance on what years we can propose funding for. And this year I wasn't even sure we were going to have a process, and we actually found out the day that it opened. We received an email saying, okay, you can submit projects over the next few weeks. Typically, we have a little bit better idea where we get an inkling of information and maybe the January, February timeline, so we can have a little bit more of a process. But it really, honestly, it seems to differ almost every year. The one nice thing is that one thing that stayed sort of consistent is that the Parks Group is given more time to help us check in at the different levels, including with the Park District. This year, that still isn't quite enough time, but it is helpful. Technically speaking, the announcement for projects indicated that we could only submit projects that would be funded in the year 2026. So typically that's if, the county is not, if it doesn't have sort of a room in the levy or other funding sources, that they would only guide new projects for 2026. The exceptions would be if there's a safety issue or if it's a preservation project. So according to our pavement management plan, if we had a project that came up that really needed to be done, let's say 2025, and for some reason we had missed it last year, we would submit that, and most likely they'd be able to find funding for it. We're deviating from the guidance a bit this year, and that is we will be submitting projects for 23, 24, and maybe 25, and that's essentially based on because number one, the projects we're submitting at this time are proposed to be fully funded from our legacy allocation. So it's all outside funding. We're not asking to put these on levy or take from fund balance or something. And the reason we didn't propose them previously is that we were going through a process of collecting information on our operations plan and then remember the big presentation to the county board. So after, starting to develop our investment timeline, almost 10 years ago now, and then determining through the comp plan process sort of where our investment dollars will go over the next few years, we sort of finalized all that in that big presentation to the board. And so some of those projects we never brought forward for confirmation in the CIP process because we hadn't had all these discussions. So we will now loop back and propose them as part of the CIP or the PIP. Let's see here. In your packet, I make reference to several of the projects. And I did miss one on there, and that is one that Nathan Moe will be talking about later on the agenda. That's the roadway guidance sign. So that's one of our recommended projects. And one of the projects that might be new to you, I'll share a little bit about it right now. And then, like I said, we'll loop back in the workshop. But there's a channel located at Cleary Lake Regional Park, or a ravine, I should say. And it goes through the golf course and it spills into the kind of southeast corner of Cleary Lake. And it's been experiencing pretty significant erosion over a number of years and periodic flooding. And, I knew this a little bit, but it's one of those projects where I think maintenance and operating staff or our visitor services staff have really been dealing with it. And for whatever reason, it never sort of rose to the top for us to address it. And in the last about 18 months, they've really said this is something that keeps getting worse and worse, and we really ought to take care of it. And so there was a small project team that engaged the Park District's water resources folks, and they've done a study. They hired a consultant, and we have a scope and some costs to fix the issue, and that's one that we're bringing forward. So that channel drains about 100-acre watershed, and the analysis that was done by, I think it was a Wank and Associates, they looked at the solids that the channel was bringing in and phosphorus. And I apologize, I'm going to give you some numbers. I forgot to collect some information that would help us understand sort of the magnitude to how to consider these. So essentially there's 12 tons a year of total suspended solids that are being brought in through that channel, and about close to 3 pounds a year of total phosphorus. The watershed district does have phosphorus removal goals for the lake. And this would, by addressing this issue, it would move us towards those goals. And another aspect of this is essentially the sedimentation over time has caused a flooding issue where the channel spills into the lake, that's right where the golf course irrigation pond sits. So there's actually a flooding issue as well, where some of our important facilities are getting flooded. So the project would stabilize the channel, I think like a total of 700 feet. And then it would also do some sort of rechannelization of where it outlets into the lake. So that's one of the projects that we're bringing forward that we wanted you folks to consider. That's all I wanted to share right now. I'm happy to answer questions now or later or both, or try to provide further information. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if folks want to talk about project ideas that could be submitted this year, I would encourage that. I do want to say we don't have a lot of time. So I also want to take advantage of our time now and during the workshop to ask the PAC if you want to start thinking of projects to bring forward next year, since we don't have a ton of time. And what I mean by not having a lot of time is depending on the project ideas, if it's a complex scope, or will take quite a bit to sort of get our justification in order, it's not going to fare well. And I feel like there sometimes year after year, we get caught in this cycle of not having enough time for discussion, and then time for staff to go back and try to prepare materials to support input from the PAC. So I'm wondering if, since we're talking about it now, maybe we should spend some time on PAC ideas for projects that we would know we probably wouldn't carry forward this year, but we might be able to start scoping them out and collecting data and whatnot for next year. So with that, I will wait for any questions.
And Patty, just to clarify, this is different than the CIP project ideas that we're going to be talking about in workshop?
No, same. So the project ideas that we'll be talking about in workshop, we're going to loop back and answer questions. I'm not going to get into a lot more detail about them. I'll review the ones that we've covered with the board. And we would talk about, do you want to rank the few that are there? So the brown signs, the channel project. I also wanted to ask if folks are interested. This is one that staff forgot to bring forward, but I know that I know it was a miss, and that's the van for remember the outdoor rec folks that asked for a van. Yep. So really it's just those three, but then I wanted to take time to see if the PAC had ideas.
So should we be doing that in workshop, off recording in workshop later?
Sure, we can. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Yep.
In the packet too, I provided the current approved CIP. So that's the 21 to 24 or 25. And I wanted the opportunity to answer questions about that too, if people had any questions.
And just to clarify again, so that everybody's looking at the same thing, can you pull that up on your screen to share it so that we can confirm it's the Park Improvement Program projects for 2021, correct?
You want me to do that, Barb?
If you can, I just want to make sure everybody is on the same page at what we're referencing. I believe they are.
Absolutely. It's just a sec here. So let me know when you see the agenda.
Yep, we do.
And I will scroll down. So I'm just going through the packet. So here's the memo for the 22 to 2026. And then one of the attachments was just for reference, was the 21 to 25 plan that was submitted and approved last year. And you can see a summary.
Yeah.
So there's a summary of spending. Here's the summary of all the projects. So what we do is we show these are all the 21 projects, 2022 and so on. You can see the project types. We have many new capabilities, and those are the acquisitions, which we should have an update for you on those next at our June meeting. And here's an example of a preservation project, parking road and parking lot seal coat. And then I'm not going to talk too much about this, but some of you may have heard about this McMahon Lake Outlook project. That's a project of the Scott WMO, but it needed to land somewhere in the county's capital plan. So they decided to put it in the Parks Improvement Program. It doesn't take money away from us, it's funded elsewhere. It just had to run through one of the chapters. Here's our regional trail master plans. And then you'll start to see like our Spring Lake development project, that's in 2022. 2023, we have some campground stuff at Cleary. 24 and 25. So the projects you see listed here, part of the CIP process involves making sure that we're tracking any changes to our funding in the already approved projects or any cost changes. So especially for the projects that are 1 to 2 years out, we spend quite a bit of time making sure our costs are tracking with reality. And then those typically, they might change by $1,000. They might go up or down just a little bit. Just because I find it kind of interesting, this boardwalk one, that's going to go up substantially because of the cost of lumber.
Correct.
Right.
Does anybody have any comments or questions on any of those items? I guess I just had one question related to the Cleary Lake, not the portable wells, but the RV sanitary dump station. Now, help me remember, how many RV sites are actually at Cleary?
We have 2.
Right, and is there any going to be discussion within the master plan to expand that?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Because that seems like a lot of money for 2 RV sites.
It
Yeah.
is. So these are, and this will probably come back to you as we talk about it. They're somewhat placeholders. So we're out of compliance with Department of Health state guidelines. So we went ahead and opened those RV sites without having all the facilities in place. So you might remember they weren't going to be public spaces. We were going to actually have hosts there.
Exactly.
And we ended up opening them up to the public. They're wildly successful. People love them. But technically speaking, we need to have these other facilities in place. We don't want to invest this money without knowing the future of the campground. That's why the master plan is happening. So the master plan is going to zero in on that campground. Some of the other facilities might be more general in terms of what it recommends. It's going to zero in on the campground so that we feel like we can invest these dollars for the wells and the dump station in a manner where it supports the future campground. So that's the idea. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I just have one question now. When we get to the workshop, are we going to kind of be going over these again, or I'm a little confused by that?
We're not
thing.
going to sorry about that. The 21 to 25 document that I included was just sort of to give an example of what the capital plan looks like. And if you wanted to look back at the approved projects. So during the workshop, we're just going to loop back, and it won't take us very long. We're going to loop back to the 3 new projects that staff is proposing to answer questions. And if the PAC would like to rank them from 1 to 3, you could do that. And if the PAC has any ideas for projects that we could potentially submit for 2026, we can talk about that.
Okay,
All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Right, are we ready to proceed to our next agenda item, which would be the 27 roadway project update?
Yes. So with this item, I'd like to provide the PAC with an update on the CASA 27 or County Road 27 road project and the proposed mitigation settlement for the impacts that that project will cause to the park. You may recall that, what was it, a little over a year ago, the PAC heard about the project and you actually provided some early input on potential mitigation options. So now that the project kind of started and stopped and started and stopped and it's back on again. And we have some changes in the potential projects and we would like your further input on that. Just as a real quick refresher, the road project, it runs from 44 down to just south of, or just about where the golf course is at the park on 27. And the project upgrades the road to a 4-lane, and then it brings a trail and a sidewalk down from essentially from almost from Murphy Hanrahan down to Cleary Lake. The intersection of 21 and 27 is going to be sort of realigned. So there's a lot of benefits from the project, but there are impacts to the park. And the county and the park district have been working together on mitigation of those impacts. And there's also been an appraisal because there is a small amount of parkland that will have to have permanent easement given to the right of way. So there had to be a mitigation process. We're still going through that process. Right now, there's a principle in agreement between the two organizations. And there needs to be some decisions on after the facilities that are directly impacted, after those are made whole, there's some remaining mitigation proceeds. And the Park District Board ultimately makes the decision on how those are invested because it's a Three Rivers property. But the Park Commission is asked to once again weigh in on ideas. And then those will be going to the Policy Committee in May. The Policy Committee, as a reminder, is made up of 2 board members from the County Board and 2 from the Park District. And they will review ideas and make a consensus recommendation for the Three Rivers Board. Ultimately, the investment that's chosen has to be approved by the Met Council. And you may remember Nathan went over this, what was it, a year and a half ago? And I'm just looking through my notes so I can reference it because I don't think I put it in your packet. The Met Council has a conversion policy. So the Cleary Lake and much of the regional park lands throughout the metro have restrictions and covenants on it that restrict the use changing. So we can't just decide Cleary is going to not serve as a park anymore. So the conversion policy that the Met Council has essentially says that parts of regional park system lands can only be converted if approved by the Met Council, and it has to involve an equally valuable land or facility exchange. And the guidance on that is that first and foremost, the sort of exchange should happen at the same park where the impacts happen, unless there's no other reasonable alternative. That if you're exchanging land, that it has to have comparable or better natural resource characteristics, or potentially it has to involve comparable or better recreation opportunities than the land being released from the covenant. When the Park Commission looked at this a while ago, I think I put it in the packet that I think the majority of the park commission supported acquiring an easement or land at Murphy Hanrahan. And there was no support for a couple of items like the digital sign. And when we brought that information, when staff brought that information to the policy committee, they were not as interested in acquisition or the easement. And their direction was, let's invest it at Cleary, and let's look for something that directly benefits visitors. That was essentially the last time we talked with the policy committee about it. And now we're looped back after many months of unknown whether when and if the project would happen. We're here again. I reached out to the staff team for their ideas. It's always, I think, helpful to hear from the field staff, for the PAC and the policy committee and the board to take that at least into consideration. And I've shared that with you. And during the workshop session, I'm hoping that we can, similar to the CIP conversation, have more dialogue on, would you like to rank these projects? Do you have other ideas that might fit the criteria, and answer questions? Any questions at this point before we talk about it further in workshop?
I have one, Patty. The Cleary Lake Channel Stabilization I see is listed as one of the projects that might be a mitigation option. Is that something that would be a park expense anyway, or would that be another one that would be with the watershed? Kind of like the McMahon Lake thing.
It would not, the watershed, there isn't watershed funding for it.
Okay, just wanted to know whether.
Yeah, good question.
What are the pavilion upgrades? What's the thought there?
Right, so that's an example of a project that came from staff that there's been no prior discussion, there's no scope. It could be anything, right? So we essentially have said, probably shouldn't move that one forward. Too bad it wasn't brought up a year ago. I wanted it on there to share just what staff is thinking, but it's not a realistic one. There's just, there's not enough time. Yeah. The project is intended to start this August. And if all approvals go well, and we can work on this over the next 4 months in terms of getting approvals from Met Council, then we would be able to give permission for the road project to start impacting the park. And if we start looking at investments that are super complex and take a lot of cost estimating and discussion, that timeline will fall apart. And what that means is the project would not happen until, our pieces of the project wouldn't happen until next year. It's more expensive, and it also causes more visitor impacts. So we're trying to come up with good projects that are a good investment, but that aren't brand new and haven't had any discussion.
I have a nagging thought in my brain that there was some discussions around improving something related to the dog park. I don't see anything that came up out of the project list from staff related to the dog park. I don't visit the dog park, so I'm just wondering if anybody else is aware of any issues there, and they maybe had been rectified. I think it had to do with the muddy conditions, or
there
adding an
were
amenity like a washing station. I just know that that's so highly used that I didn't want to overlook an opportunity with something at the dog park if needed.
Well, there's 3 things on there.
For the dog park?
Yeah, isn't that what DOLA is?
It is, thank you.
Oh, silly me, thank you.
But they're not along the lines,
Wash station there.
yeah,
The
that's a
pond,
really,
if that was an option for washing your dog.
Well, I think that was some of the, I remember there being some discussion
too.
about that, the ponding area. Should it be accessible? Was it creating more problems? Or dogs are getting too dirty? People asking for a wash station? So,
Madam Chair, would you like me to show the projects now and we can actually talk about them a little bit while we're on the topic and then loop back?
that's fine.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen. So here's the pavilion upgrade, and you can say there's, this is a new idea, no scope. We have no idea about costs. It's most likely outside of the funding range. I forgot to mention that, Met Council will not approve a project where we say, well, we want to do X. We don't have all the funding identified, but we promise we'll do it. Not going to happen. So we really need to show them that we have funding identified and that it can happen within a pretty short timeline. They haven't given us exactly what that time frame is, but it's probably 2 years or less from the start of the project or impact. So just a little background there. The digital message sign came up again from staff. It didn't score high though. I asked the team to score it and I didn't have time to completely analyze it. But generally speaking, the digital message sign scored low. The Cleary Lake, the channel stabilization was one of the higher rated projects from staff if you're interested, as was the ADA accessible kayak and canoe launch. The hammock stands, some folks said, that might be kind of like low hanging fruit, that maybe if we really think that's a good idea, maybe we look for funding elsewhere. This rehabilitation of the volleyball courts actually got rated pretty well. The channel was, I think, the highest rated one, but the volleyball courts were, maybe they would fall in maybe the 3rd ranking. And that's something where we don't have a design and cost estimate, but our maintenance folks think that's maybe a $50,000 investment. So the pay station at the dog off leash area, that scored pretty low, but that was our visitor services team who recommended that. Those are pretty expensive to operate. The Park District Finance Group as policy no longer wants to support expansion of those. So there are some issues there. And then here's one, expanding the parking lot. So that idea is new. I know we've heard from a lot of users that they would like the lot paved, that when it is rainy and wet, it's really messy for their dogs. Throughout the Park District, there aren't any paved off-leash dog area lots. Not to say that we couldn't pave this one, just giving you some context. The challenge about talking about expanding it is we literally have never talked about it. There's no scope, no idea, what that looks like. I think it'd be far more than $100,000, or could be. And then the pond, there's the pond there that we get complaints about the water quality, but probably something that's more complex and extends over time. We don't know what it would involve. So that didn't rank very, very high from staff. And then here's the paving. We've heard some feedback, and over the years, there's been some interest to pave the entrance off of 68, at least to the entrance of the dog park, and maybe pave the dog park parking lot. I don't think we could afford both of those things. I will share that because we've talked about this quite a bit, and there's very cursory cost estimates, we And this is something that I know Leslie has been interested in the past. I wouldn't be surprised if this in some format came up and the question was brought up that the fund balance that is carried for the partnership potentially could contribute to make this a project and to use that 100,000. So the wash station for the dogs. Just making note of that.
One question regarding any potential paving projects. Would the timing align that could be done in conjunction with, it appears that they're going to be repaving the roadway 27 and, you know, so
As a part of the project?
Yeah, could it be done as part of the project?
Maybe.
You know, because there's a potential savings that way. You know, if the trucks are hauling, the asphalt and it's, so,
Just make a note of that.
yeah. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Hearing none. Should we proceed on to our next agenda item, which is the roadway directional sign program?
Sounds good.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I know this one is probably one you've been really excited about since you got the agenda. I know how popular brown signs are, so I'm happy to bring an update on this project for you. Yeah, so the project is moving forward into phase 2. We have worked with the county engineer, Mark Callahan, and he is in support of a project that would create a standard for our guide signs. In your packet, there is a map that shows the locations of signs in brown that exist. And then there are some added locations that would help define a standard that would have essentially guide signs at every major trunk highway or major county road that passes by a regional park at the very minimum. So we are looking at the condition of the signs. I think that was previously discussed in when we talked about the sign program earlier. Several of them are in poor condition and would need replacement. And then, like I said, we were looking at locations with the traffic engineer, Mark Callahan, and have his support. There are a few locations that are here that are not straightforward to move into getting accepted by the agencies involved. So a pair of signs at near Cedar Lake Farm on the west and the east along County Road 2 are on state trunk highways, and we would need approvals from them. And then there is one location for Murphy on 42, County Road 42, that is in Dakota County. We've had early conversations with them, and I don't think there would be any problems with getting that approved, but just something to take note of as we are moving this project forward if it gets the funding needed. I don't want to delve too deeply into a lot of this since we are going to be talking about it in workshop afterwards, but I wanted to offer an opportunity for any questions that would be recorded for the public record about this project, and I'll open that time up to you, I think, unless there's anything else you think I need to touch on, Patty. I think that's kind of the high level components of it.
It was nice to, Madam Chair, can I just add that I really appreciated Nathan being able to work with the highway operations folks. They're, I think, really collaborative when it comes to this and really supportive in providing some good guidance. And it was nice to see the inventory. In the past, it was kind of like just adding one here or there. And I feel like there's now support to have some structure to this, which is great. So I just wanted to kind of mention that and acknowledge and thank Nathan for working with those guys on the program. And then just to give some context to the number of signs, Nathan, is there, once this is done, what either is it 22 signs existing in place, or once this is done, we'll have 22, around 22 signs, is that right?
Once it's done, I believe there'll be 21 locations. with
Okay.
signs. Yeah.
Is that 21 pairs?
No, 21 total signs, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. There is one piece that I didn't neglected to mention. I knew there was something I was missing, but we also had talked previously in a presentation about an equity grant, about incorporating some amenity signs that would accompany each of these signs. And we've worked a little bit more to better understand what that could be. And as part of this new standard, we're proposing that we would include these, they're called cultural and recreational guide signs, and they are defined by the Minnesota Department of Transportation. And I've included several examples in the memo, and in workshop, we'll take a look a little bit more at some of the options we can incorporate in there, but it's an opportunity to raise awareness when we're advertising the location of these signs, both of awareness of the activities that are available within the park. So we're excited about that improvement. And I think, there is some evidence from Met Council's research that this is one of the ways that people access information about the park. And I think we have a real opportunity here that could benefit the public.
I guess I just have one comment. I know we're going to be expanding discussions about opening Doyle Kinnific, and I didn't see them or identification of any potential signage related to the Doyle Kinnific Park. So just, that's my only comment, I guess.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I think my vision of how this project, once implemented, is creating a standard so that once the park is officially opened, the traffic engineer would have support for implementing something with the same standard. So at that point, we would look at locations for those brown signs, as well as discuss what amenity associated signs would be.
Yep. And do you envision, like, it seems like it's been a long process to get here. So going forward, as parks expand or amenities change and they expand, and those are things we can talk about in workshop a little bit more. But I just want to remind people that this is, obviously not just for these parks, but all of ours going forward. So we'll discuss it a little more in workshop then too. So thanks. I appreciate it, Nathan. It's just excellent work again. Does anybody else have any questions or comments at this point?
Looks like Commissioner Stieg may have his
hi, Pat.
hand raised.
Yes,
Yes,
Pat. Thank you.
Nathan, I just wanted to clarify, I'm looking at the map that you provided, and I'm seeing the numbers along County Road 42, 9, 10, and then 11. And 11 is the proposed sign that you mentioned that is just across the border in Dakota County?
I am looking at the packet, and that is an older version. Let me catch up to you quickly. I have the numbered one that I can access really quickly. Number 11 is the one in Dakota County, yes.
Okay.
Is that your question?
Yeah, and then so 9 and 10 are the ones near the intersection of 42 and 27.
That's correct.
And those are ones we're looking to replace or upgrade?
Yes.
Okay.
Those any that are existing, we are looking to replace them. And if they are in poor quality or not up to our current standard, and then the purple ones are just new signs that there's nothing existing in those locations.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because I go past that intersection frequently, and it's probably sign number 10 that is almost invisible at this point.
Yes,
Thank you.
there are a handful that are like that.
So the
And Chair can, whoops.
Go ahead,
I'm s-
Kathy.
other question. So the proposal is to replace everything that's good as well, or just the cracked, very cracked and faded, very faded?
So the project commenced by looking at the inventory of what is existing and recognizing that some of them are in good shape, and if they meet the standard, they would not need replacement. And within that inventory, we had a better understanding of which ones needed replacement. So several of the ones in brown would be replaced, but the ones associated with cedar and spring and the landing are all in good shape and would not need replacing.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I have a question for Nathan. Nathan, do you know if the highway group, so we've developed this new standard and we have an inventory, and by the way, there's a really great photo inventory that goes with this. Do we know if they have like an operations manual or something where this will be included in that? I'm wondering how we make this a part of practice. I think this is obviously a really good first step.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we need to formalize something because it probably exists currently with just standard that Mark Callahan accepts, and maybe isn't something that is formally accepted as a plan. But that should be part of the plan moving forward, I think.
I would bet that highway operations has somewhat of an annual work plan or like a approved maintenance practices or something like that, in that we should check on that and see if this can be incorporated into that document.
I agree.
Yeah, okay. I'm not convinced that staff turnover won't in the future be an impact on this.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, not hearing any other questions or comments. Let's go ahead to our next agenda item, which will be agenda item number 8A, Nature Connection. And I believe Alyssa's going to has an update for us.
Yes, thank you so much, Madam Chair. So the Nature Connection is included in your packet at the back. I'm trying to pull it up. But this month, I just wanted to highlight an opportunity that Patty and I had. We had the opportunity to go walk a potential acquisition site down in the future boundary of the Blakely Bluffs Park Reserve. So we spent a few hours walking this 11-acre site that was primarily is all floodplain forest. It's right along the Minnesota River. We were really lucky to have some tour guides. So we have some adjacent parkland property to this property that we're hoping to have. And there are individuals that are residing there and are really familiar with the land. And they helped show us around. It was really cool to hear some of the cultural histories, and Patty definitely fill in too with the names of these individuals. But there's hearing some really cool cultural histories of the land, and it was a really beautiful morning. Since we've had a pretty dry spring, a lot of the floodplain forest hadn't flooded, so we were able to really walk and experience this, you know, the forest as is, and it was just a very lovely morning. And it was exciting to think that, you know, to come and see this land and kind of hear the stories, and then think that, you know, one day it could possibly be, you know, protected by the legacy of being a park reserve, that other people that could also, so that other people could also experience it like we were. So I encourage you, there are some photos from from our walk. I encourage you to look at them, and I'd be happy to take any questions about the nature connection.
Can I share this screen and show the photos?
Oh, please do. I took a lot. It was really hard to pick just like a few for this. It was a really gorgeous day.
Just a sec, my packet disappeared.
And some members will probably remember our excursion onto the riverbanks a few years back when we toured Blakely Bluff. And so I'm assuming that you were accessing it and went under the train bridge.
Correct.
Yep, to get down to the river bottom. And when Patty, if you haven't seen the picture, but I think is the picture that looks like a trail. I mean, is that what they can? I remember it being referred to as the old Pioneer Road, or the some of the historical perspective of that was the the Prairie Schooner Passage Road and things like that.
Yeah, I believe that it was the old, thank you for that comment, Madam Chair. I believe that in the one that looks like a trail, I believe that was the old railway corridor before they moved it.
Ah, got it.
To the
Okay.
new location. But yeah, so there was an obvious trail there, but we were actually informed too that there was recently like a mudslide over there. So that was kind of, that's not the part of the trail that has the mudslide on it, but. So yeah, there was lots of Dutchman's breeches blooming, like so many of them along the hillside. You just saw like little patches of white. It was really pretty. Felt like spring.
Great, thank you. Patty, do you have anything else to add? If you do, I can't hear it. Let me check the status here.
Hi, I've been having a little bit of technical difficulties. I just wanted to share, this is the rail bed. So we would have walked down here and gone under the trestle.
Yeah.
Like you were mentioning, Madam Chair, and our tour guides were Lynn Albrecht, who grew up in the area, and John Schmidt, who was born on the property adjacent to the county's land, and as a kid played on all this land and has so many stories to share. And they were wonderful tour guides. And I think Lynn has been our Park Commission tour guide in the past as well. And they're willing to do it again. And when we were out there, I loved that we were having a nature connection. So John and Lynn are very familiar with the land, and John seems to know his wildflowers and stuff. And we were also having this connection to, the culture of the recent culture of the area, the last 100 years, and reminded me of all the rich stories there are to capture. And that's only from, 100 years. And it was exciting, like Alyssa said, very inspirational and exciting to think of what hopefully that park will be in a few years.
All right, thank you. We'll go on to our next agenda item, number 8B. Commissioner reports. Any updates from any commissioners? I'll go ahead and share an update that I was going to have that kind of loops back to the nature connection. And it was an article I saw in an AARP magazine that talked about ways to continue to challenge your brain. And one of the brain challenges in there was to basically be engaged in nature, in a nature pyramid. What caught my attention about it is it talked about a 25-3 plan, 20 meaning 20 minutes being spent outside 3 times a week in like a park or a garden or an urban wildlife setting, then spending 5 hours each month in a semi-wild setting, more along the lines of a regional park or along waterways, less urban intrusion type areas. And then 3 days a year in an off-grid nature experience, such as camping or renting a cabin that's more remote. And it reminded me a lot of our discussions of the nature prescription, the nature RX. But I also thought it was interesting to think of it even within how our different park partners exist. For example, city parks are where you are more typically would get perhaps that 3 times a week, 20 minutes outside experience with parks and gardens and things like that. And how the 5 hours a month in a semi-wild environment is where I think our regional parks in the area can really fill a gap in providing that more wild type of exposure, accessing onto waterways when we think about creating water trails. And then, it'd be great to think about camping and renting experiences, expanding of those. So that was just my nature connection update and my commissioner report. Does anybody else have anything to add related to any updates or anything they'd like to share from the commissioners?
Sure, I'll
Yes,
throw
Madam
something
Chair,
out there.
this-
Oh, go ahead, Pat.
Madam Chair, this is Pat, and just to follow up on what you said, I've continued to work with Alyssa with Scott County Parks, along with Park and Recreation in Shakopee, as well as in my role over in Carver County with Carver County Parks and the City of Chaska to work on that Nature RX, Park RX initiative. And as I've reported in the past, looking at how we can all have a better understanding of some of the challenges that different population groups have to having full advantage of all the amenities that are offered through our regional and city parks. And as I've mentioned, we're focusing on the Latino community and working with Outdoor Latino Minnesota. So we're looking forward to hopefully having programs in all 4 park systems sometime this summer. But I also wanted to share that this past Saturday, I had the chance to work with Alyssa and Nathan out at Cleary Lake as they were doing community outreach for the Cleary Master Plan work. And particularly we're looking to attract members of our Latino community in Scott County. And they just did a fabulous job, had delicious food. And we really, I think, were able to hear from a fair number of people who came out for that event and gave input into the master plan from their perspective. So I just wanted to congratulate both of them on a very successful event this past Saturday.
Great, excellent. I'm glad to hear that. So
here,
Eric,
yep. So this past Saturday, I was up at Lone Lake Park up in Minnetonka area. I don't know if you guys have ever been up there. There's a new mountain bike trail system right off of, I think, 494 and one of the roads up there, 169, somewhere up in that area, right? And I was talking to another biker and I mentioned that I'm from, down by Murphy, and he was asking about the, like the theft and breaking of windows of cars. I know, Patty, you were going to be meeting with, I don't know if it was the service or the sheriff or something to talk about it. Do you have an update on that?
Yeah, we're meeting actually tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. So we've not updated the pack that at the beginning of the pandemic, and then it's resurging now, break-ins in the community, not just at parks, but at parking lots and out in the community have really surged. And the Murphy Hanrahan lots are getting hit pretty hard. They're not the only lot, but they are getting hit pretty hard. And we worked all through the summer with the Scott County Sheriff Office, the City of Prior Lake were involved through the Sheriff's Office and with Richard Durdley, our PSO, in the City of Savage, PD. And there were some arrests made I don't have all the details. And we were hoping that, that would make a difference, and it did for a period of time. So there was more patrolling, more attention paid, and staff. We completely redid the signage at parking lots. So either there wasn't sign at our parking lots, or it was outdated signs. And we put in new signs that essentially say, stop, beware, don't leave valuables in your car. There had been old signs that said things like, don't leave valuables in plain sight in your car, which I've never understood that sign, because wouldn't that just mean like you just have to look harder for the valuables? But anyways, so you should be seeing new signs. And there was also flyers that went out, especially at the Cleary lot, because the Cleary lot actually had a few break-ins over a period of time, and staff, and they've done this in past years, put flyers on cars saying, hey, just so you know, be thoughtful about this, never leave anything in your car. But they've spiked again. So, and enough so that, like Eric is mentioning, people are noticing it, and we're skidding around. And the volunteer group that helps maintain the mountain bike trails, MORC, started to hear from the leaders there, started to hear from the volunteers who were saying like, gosh, we don't know if we want to go and park in that parking lot. So we need to, re-engage on that. I think the measures that we did maybe helped a little, but we need to sort of get a plan from the sheriff's office and others and figure out next steps. We have had people that are asking a lot about the use of surveillance cameras, and it's a really complex solution. There's the infrastructure piece at Cleary without having lighting there, and not great power. So there's the initial infrastructure, and then the whole process of who monitors the feed, and then how does that communicate to the sheriff's office and such. So it's not a new conversation. We brought it up with the sheriff's office this summer, and they didn't want to jump towards that. There's also the consideration of policy boards and how they feel about having surveillance cameras up. So a lot of different pieces that come together in this. But the big update is tomorrow morning we're meeting. So we have 3 people from the Scott County Sheriff Office. We have a woman joining us from the Savage PD. She has a wonderful name. Her name is Georgianne Freeman. And someone at the SCSO who represents the New Credit River, and some Park District leadership, myself, Tom Bulk, and Richard. So we're going to hear what are the reports, what are people seeing, what are folks' what's the suggestion, and what are our next steps. One of the unfortunate things is that when there are break-ins, not everyone reports it. So getting an idea of a pattern, I think, is challenging. So that's what I have to share now, and we can provide an update at the June meeting.
Yeah, that'd be great, right? Like I
Yeah,
said,
Eric, anything that you would want to offer, or any questions based on what I just shared?
No, I've seen it on like the website, right? But the word's getting out, right? So people are nervous about it. But I was there last Sunday morning for a trail run, and I've never seen that many cars there that early in the morning. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the entire parking lot was packed. So I don't think theft is happening on those days. I think theft is happening, or break-ins of cars are happening during the week, right?
Mm-hmm.
When there's
Eric,
only a few cars there.
Eric, did MORC make a posting on behalf of the Park District? That was one of the things we were working on.
I don't know if I saw that. Was it on their Facebook page, or was it on their website? I could look it up too.
It would have been on both. So we've been asking the Park District, and actually I think they may have put this on Facebook to come up with some kind of communication on all the Park District Facebook pages. I don't know if that's happened. And then we were hoping that MORC could, and something along the lines of keep an eye out. We are working on some new solutions, and if there's ever a break-in, please call 911. I don't know if that's happened yet, though.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen anything like that at all, right?
Okay.
I thought I saw something just on the Facebook page for Murphy Hanrahan, or maybe it was just another bicycle, website.
Yeah.
But like I said, it pops up, right? And people are saying, hey, maybe I shouldn't go down there. It doesn't look like it's really impacted anybody based on how many people were there this past weekend. Seriously, between the runners and the bikers, it was crazy. And the dog park, of course. Only one more item, too. Controlled burning over at Murphy Hanrahan. We talked about it last Thursday a little bit. I don't know if you guys could give an update on that.
Oh, you mean just that it happened?
Yeah, it just happened, right? I think Alyssa and I were talking about it on Thursday. But it happened last week, about a week and a half ago, maybe. Like,
Yeah,
by the
and
by the horse trails.
yeah, and it was, I don't really have anything other than there was a
Easy enough.
prescribed burn.
Yeah, we were just kind of shocked. We went for a run the week before, everything looked nice and things were starting to be green. And this time when we went running, it was like the burning fields, right? Everything was black, everything looked like coffee grounds right everywhere. So I know it's gonna get green in the next couple of weeks, but it was kind of a surprise to see that much being burnt. It was fields and fields and fields of it. But it looked good. I mean, everything looked clean. It didn't look like, trees started on fire or anything like that. It was mostly fields.
And it sounds like from the way you describe it, that they got a really good burn. I mean, that's what you usually hope for, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Seriously, it was so weird to see, but so it looked much better this past Sunday when I went running there. So I think that's about all that I had.
All right, thank you, Eric. Are there any other commissioner updates? Hearing none, seeing no raised hands. We will proceed to our last agenda item before the workshop. And that is upcoming meetings in our June PAC meeting and topics to be on those.
Yes, Alyssa will have an update on how successful we were with the equity grant applications. I think Alyssa and Nathan are thinking June would be a good time for a Clear Lake Master Plan update. We may have, I may be able to loop back about capital budget, and I may have more information for operations budget for the PAC to look at. And then we may have something on getting going the Spring Lake Lakefront design and engagement. That one's tentative.
Excellent. Now, do we entertain a motion to dismiss before going into workshop?
Yeah.
So then I will entertain a motion to dismiss. Or,
Adjourn. Oh,
pardon?
that was for the workshop, Kathy Gerlach.
So Kathy, you were breaking up. Do we have a motion to adjourn from you?
I just said I moved to adjourn the meeting to move to the workshop.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. We will be ending the recording and we'll go into the workshop.